The Kethric Armada materialized at the edge of Earth's solar system with 847 warships, their hulls gleaming with victory patterns from a dozen conquered worlds. Fleet Commander Zaltef stood on the bridge of the dreadnought Inevitable Dominion, watching the primitive blue planet rotate on his tactical display, and allowed himself a predatory smile. Intelligence indicated fewer than 30 orbital defense platforms and perhaps 100 atmospheric interceptors. The humans had no shield technology, no faster-than-light weapons, and their largest warship massed barely 12,000 tons. This would be over in hours. Broadcast standard terms, Zaltef commanded, his crest feathers rising with satisfaction. Demand immediate surrender. Remind them of the Kethric Empire's mercy to those who submit without resistance. His communications officer chittered acknowledgement and transmitted. Across the fleet, captains checked weapon systems and began calculating orbital bombardment patterns. They'd conquered 17 species in the past 2 centuries, each one weaker than the last. This primitive backwater wouldn't even qualify as a challenge. The human response came within minutes. A single transmission, audio only, from someone who identified himself as Admiral Marcus Chen, Earth Defense Command. Negative. You have 30 minutes to reverse course and leave this system. This is your only warning. Silence filled the Kethric command ship. Then laughter rippled through the bridge crew. 30 platforms against 847 warships, and these primitives issued warnings? Zaltef's tactical officer pulled up comparative data, displaying it for the crew's amusement. The humans used chemical rockets for propulsion. Chemical. Their weapons were kinetic projectiles and primitive directed energy. They had no gravitic technology, no quantum disruption fields, no reality anchors. By every metric that mattered, they were 300 years behind Kethric military capabilities. Inform the human admiral that we will accept his surrender when his stations are destroyed, Zaltef said. Advance the fleet. Battle formation Crimson Wave. Let's make this educational. The Armada surged forward, engines burning brilliant blue as they accelerated toward the inner system. 847 vessels, from the massive dreadnoughts down to the nimble corvettes, arranged themselves in the crushing formation that had shattered the Vorton defense sphere and the Quilix asteroid fortresses. Weapons charged. Shields activated. The Kethric had perfected the art of overwhelming force. On Earth, Admiral Chen watched the alien fleet advance and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Not fear. Not even concern. Just a cold, professional focus that came from knowing exactly what was about to happen. He touched the comm panel on his command chair, connecting to the scattered defense platforms and the deeper networks that the Kethric scanners couldn't detect. All stations, this is Chen. Implement Protocol Remembrance. Authorization, Sierra Victor 779. Confirmed, his tactical officer replied. Commander Sarah Okonkwo had served with Chen for 12 years, through the long preparation, through the waiting. She met his eyes with grim understanding. Activating legacy systems. Power signatures will spike in 40 seconds. Let them see it, Chen said. They need to understand what they're dealing with. Across Earth's orbital space, the defense platforms began transforming. Panels retracted. Weapon ports opened. And deep within each structure, reactors that had been dormant for 2 centuries hummed to life with a distinctive quantum resonance that any species in the galaxy would recognize immediately. Any species that remembered the War of Extinction. Aboard the Inevitable Dominion, alarms shrieked. Zaltef's sensor officer stumbled backward from his console, crest feathers flattening in primal fear. Commander. Those platforms, the energy signatures, they're architect-class quantum reactors. The bridge fell silent. Every Kethric officer knew that designation. Every child in the Empire learned about the architects in their first history lessons. The species that had ruled 70% of the galaxy for 10,000 years. The species whose technology was so advanced that their weapons could shatter planets and their ships could fold spacetime itself. The species that had been extinct for 200 years, destroyed in a war so catastrophic that the Empire had risen from the ashes they left behind. Impossible, Zaltef whispered. The humans couldn't have, they're primitives. They don't even have gravitic drives. Scanning now, his science officer said, voice tight. Commander, I'm detecting weapons platforms using architect quantum containment. The design is modified, cruder, but the core technology is unmistakable. And there are more than 30 platforms. I'm reading, 78 orbital stations. No, wait. 112. They're rising from the planet's gravity well. They were hiding in low orbit, powered down. Zaltef's mind raced. The architects had been invincible. Their smallest warships could devastate entire fleets. The Empire had spent decades studying their ruins, reverse engineering scraps of their technology, and still understood less than 5% of it. If the humans had somehow acquired architect weapons, if they'd learned to use them. New contacts, the sensor officer screamed. Ships emerging from the asteroid belt. 47, no, 70, contacts multiplying. Commander, they're using architect cloaking systems. They've been here the entire time. On Earth's command station, Chen watched the Kethric fleet hesitate. Good. They were starting to understand. He opened a channel to the human fleet elements, the warships that had been waiting in the belt for 3 weeks, their architect-derived stealth systems rendering them invisible to anything short of a full gravimetric sweep. Captain Reeves, you are weapons-free. Show them what we learned. The human warship Remembrance decloaked 30,000 kilometers from the Kethric vanguard. She was ugly by modern standards, a brutal wedge of armor and weapons with none of the elegant curves of Empire designs. But mounted along her spine were 4 quantum disruptors, and when they fired, the universe itself seemed to scream. The beam struck the lead Kethric destroyer and didn't just penetrate the shields. It made the shields irrelevant. The quantum disruptor phased matter out of sync with local spacetime for precisely 0.3 seconds. That was all it took. The destroyer's forward third simply ceased to exist in conventional space, and when reality reasserted itself, the vessel tore itself apart from the inside as atmosphere explosively decompressed and the reactor containment failed. Direct hit, Commander Okonkwo reported. Target destroyed. Remembrance reports all systems nominal. More human ships decloaked. 50. 80. 120. Every one of them built around architect technology cores, weapons that the galaxy had thought lost forever. They weren't as advanced as true architect warships had been. Humanity had only recovered fragments, ruins, broken systems they'd painstakingly studied and rebuilt over 2 centuries. But against the Kethric Empire, against species that had never faced architect weapons in actual combat, they were devastating. Zaltef finally found his voice. Tactical retreat. Formation scattered cloud. Get us out of their weapons range. But the human ships didn't pursue. They held position at the edge of the belt, weapons charged, a clear defensive perimeter. Chen had no interest in chasing the Kethric fleet through open space. Let them regroup. Let them think. Let them remember what species they just threatened. He opened a broad-spectrum channel, broadcasting to the entire alien armada. Fleet Commander Zaltef, Chen said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. You came to Earth expecting conquest. Let me educate you on recent history. 214 years ago, the architects decided humanity was a contamination to be purged. They sent a war fleet to sterilize our world. We had no shields, no FTL, no quantum weapons. We were, as you observed, primitives. The channel held dead silence. The architect fleet never made it home, Chen continued. Neither did the second fleet. Or the third. By the time they sent their fourth fleet, we'd reverse-engineered enough of their technology to meet them in deep space. The war lasted 73 years. It ended when we destroyed their core worlds and hunted down every remaining architect vessel in this spiral arm. The ruins you've been scavenging for the past 2 centuries? We put them there. Zaltef felt his blood turn cold. The Empire had always wondered what happened to the architects. The historical record showed a thriving civilization, then sudden collapse, then nothing. Every theory had focused on internal war, plague, economic failure. No one had seriously considered that they'd been destroyed. The architects had been gods. Nothing could have challenged them. "You're lying," Zaltef said, but his voice carried no conviction. The architects were invincible. "They thought so too," Chen replied. "Here's what's going to happen, Commander. You're going to take your fleet and leave this system. You're going to return to your empire and tell them exactly what you found here. Tell them Earth is under permanent quarantine. Tell them that if any Kethric vessel enters this system again, we will do to your species what we did to the architects. And if we refuse?" Zaltef demanded, trying to summon defiance even as his tactical display showed the human weapons tracking his ships with mechanical precision. Chen's voice dropped, quiet and cold. "Then we'll teach you why the galaxy forgot the architect's name. 30 minutes, Commander. Choose wisely." The channel closed. Zaltef stared at his display, at the human ships bristling with impossible technology, at the orbital platforms that could shatter his dreadnoughts, at the blue planet that had somehow survived and defeated the most powerful species the galaxy had ever known. His first officer looked at him, waiting for orders, and Zaltef realized he was facing a decision that would define the Empire's future. But pride and fear warred within him, and the Empire had not built its strength through cowardice. He thought of the conquered worlds, the subject species, the Kethric legacy of dominance. He thought of returning home with tales of retreat from primitives who should have been easy prey. "Prepare the fleet," he finally said. "All ships, charge primary weapons. We'll test their defenses properly before we make any decisions." Around him, his officers moved to execute the command, but Zaltef noticed their hesitation, the way their crest feathers remained flat with unease. They'd all seen what happened to that destroyer. They'd all grown up hearing legends about the invincible architects. And now they'd met the species that had killed them. The Kethric armada surged forward with 847 warships charging weapons, and Admiral Chen gave the command that would reshape galactic history. "All platforms, full power. Show them everything." The orbital defense stations lit up like newborn stars. Each platform had been built around salvaged architect reactor cores, technology that humanity had spent 2 centuries mastering through blood and desperation. Now those reactors fed weapons that could tear holes in reality itself. The first volley of quantum disruptors lanced across 30,000 kilometers in an eye blink, and 6 Kethric cruisers simply evaporated as their molecular bonds ceased to exist. "Enemy shields are completely ineffective against quantum weapons," Commander Okonkwo reported. "Their defensive doctrine is built around energy dispersion. They don't understand that our weapons bypass conventional spacetime entirely." Zaltef watched his tactical display with mounting horror as red icons blinked out of existence. Evasive maneuvers. Scatter formation. Don't let them target clusters. The armada broke apart like a flock of birds fleeing a predator, ships burning hard in every direction. A smart tactic against concentrated fire, but the humans had fought the architects for 73 years. They'd learned patience and precision under species that could calculate trajectories across dimensions. "Tracking solutions locked," Okonkwo said calmly. Firing. The human ships didn't waste ammunition chasing individual targets. They fired on predicted intercept points, letting physics and mathematics do the work. 3 more Ketheric vessels died as they maneuvered directly into weapons fire they couldn't see coming. The Empire had never faced an enemy that understood warfare at this level. Aboard the inevitable Dominion, Zaltef's science officer pulled up combat recordings with shaking hands. "Commander, analyzing their tactics. They're not reacting to our movements. They're predicting them. Their targeting computers are running probability algorithms at least 50 generations ahead of ours. Then use microjumps," Zaltef snarled. "Short-range FTL. They can't predict what they can't calculate." 20 Ketheric destroyers vanished in flashes of distorted space, reappearing 8,000 kilometers away in random vectors. Standard Empire doctrine for overwhelming a superior enemy: close distance too rapidly for targeting solutions, bring overwhelming numbers to bear at point-blank range. It had worked against the Vorten. It had worked against the Quilix. The human response was immediate and brutal. Defensive positions that had appeared to be static platforms suddenly lit up with fusion drives. They'd been ships all along, camouflaged as stations, and now they moved with acceleration that would have crushed any organic crew. 20 Gs. 30. 45 Gs of sustained burn that should have been impossible. They're automated, Zaltef realized. No crew. Just AI and weapons. Captain Sarah Reeves smiled grimly from the Bridge of Remembrance, watching her tactical display track the Ketheric destroyers as they emerged from their micro-jumps. Autonomous defense platforms responding. Let's see how they handle combat drones with architect neural networks. The platforms intercepted the destroyers with mechanical precision, each one carrying enough firepower to cripple a dreadnought. They didn't dodge or maneuver defensively. They simply calculated the most efficient kill paths and executed. Quantum disruptors fired at ranges measured in hundreds of meters, and at those distances, even the Ketheric's faster-than-light evasion meant nothing. 15 destroyers died in 40 seconds. The remaining 5 broke off, their captains choosing survival over orders. Enemy formation collapsing, Okonkwo reported. Detecting mass communication traffic. They're panicking. Chen listened to the intercepted transmissions, the Ketheric battle language fragmenting into chaos as captains screamed contradictory orders and demanded reinforcements that didn't exist. He'd heard it before, during the final years of the Architect War, when the so-called Invincible Empire finally understood they were fighting extinction. Maintain defensive perimeter, Chen ordered. Do not pursue beyond the belt. Let them regroup. Let them think. Zaltef rallied his scattered forces with a fleet-wide broadcast, his voice carrying the authority of 40 years of military command. All ships, reform at Rally Point Sigma. Dreadnoughts to the front. We're going to show these primitives what happens when they face the Empire's true strength. The 12 Ketheric dreadnoughts moved forward, each one massing over 400,000 tons and carrying enough firepower to sterilize a continent. Their shields could shrug off nuclear weapons. Their armor could withstand sustained bombardment from lesser vessels. They represented 2 centuries of Empire military evolution, the pinnacle of Ketheric engineering. Chen watched them come and felt no concern whatsoever. Commander Okonkwo, activate the planetary defense grid. Full power to the mass drivers. On Earth's surface, across every continent and ocean, weapons emerged from camouflaged bunkers that had been built during the Architect War and maintained ever since. Not elegant. Not sophisticated. Just massive electromagnetic rails that could accelerate projectiles to significant fractions of light speed. The architects had learned to fear these weapons because shields and energy fields meant nothing against kinetic projectiles moving at relativistic velocities. Firing solutions calculated, Okonkwo said. Projectiles away. The mass drivers hurled tungsten carbide penetrators massing 20 tons each, accelerated to 0.04 c. At that velocity, each projectile carried more kinetic energy than a strategic nuclear warhead. And Earth launched 300 of them in the first salvo. The dreadnought's shields lit up brilliant blue as they detected incoming fire, energy fields designed to disperse and deflect. The tungsten rods punched through those shields like they didn't exist, because physics didn't care about energy fields when mass and velocity reached certain thresholds. The first dreadnought took 17 hits along its port side, and the kinetic energy converted to heat so rapidly that sections of hull armor simply vaporized. Atmosphere explosive decompressed from 12 breached decks. The ship didn't die immediately, but it tumbled out of formation, reactor containment failing, secondary explosions rippling through its structure. Direct hits on 8 targets, Okonkwo reported. 2 dreadnoughts destroyed outright. 4 critically damaged. Remaining 6 are attempting evasive maneuvers. Zaltef stared at his tactical display in disbelief. They're using kinetic weapons. Primitive kinetic weapons. How are they penetrating our shields? His weapons officer pulled up the impact data, and the answer was there in the numbers. Commander, the projectiles are moving at 4% light speed. At those velocities, standard deflection shields are meaningless. The kinetic energy is simply too massive to redirect. Then adapt. Zaltef roared. Activate quantum hardening fields. Initiate point defense protocols. The remaining dreadnoughts adjusted their defensive systems, deploying specialized shields that could theoretically harden spacetime itself around their hulls. Experimental technology, expensive technology, but the Empire had been preparing for every possibility. Energy fields snapped into place just as the second salvo arrived. The tungsten rods hit the quantum-hardened shields and detonated in brilliant flashes, kinetic energy converting to thermal and electromagnetic radiation. The shields held. Barely. But they held. Defensive systems effective, the tactical officer reported. Quantum hardening is dispersing kinetic impacts. For the first time in the engagement, Zaltef felt hope. All ships, activate quantum hardening. Reform battle lines. We're going to. Commander, his sensor officer screamed. New contacts. Ship signatures appearing throughout the system. Hundreds of them. Chen had been waiting for this moment. Waiting for the Ketheric to reveal their best defensive technology so humanity could demonstrate why 2 centuries of preparation meant something. Captain Reeves, deploy the reserve fleet. Authorization, Architect Protocol Omega. From hiding places throughout the solar system, from beneath lunar craters and asteroid caverns and the orbital shadows of Jupiter's moons, the human reserve fleet decloaked. Not 100 ships. Not 200. 873 warships, each one built around Architect technology cores, each one carrying weapons that had been refined and perfected over 2 centuries of study and development. The Ketheric had brought 847 ships to conquer Earth. Humanity met them with 873, every vessel specifically designed to counter Empire military doctrine. Impossible, Zaltef whispered. They're primitives. They don't have the industrial capacity. They don't have the resources. But they did, because humanity had been preparing for this exact scenario since the last architect died. They'd mined the asteroid belt dry. They'd built shipyards in the outer system where enemy sensors couldn't detect them. They'd unified every nation and faction on Earth around a single purpose: never again. Never again would humanity face extinction unprepared. Captain Marcus Rodriguez brought his destroyer Defiant alongside 3 Ketheric frigates, his weapons already tracking targets. All ships, focus fire. Show them what happens when you threaten Earth. The human fleet didn't engage cautiously. They attacked with the absolute certainty of species that had already fought and won against a superior enemy. Quantum disruptors, mass drivers, fusion torpedoes, and weapons the Ketheric had never seen before filled the space between planets with deadly light. The Empire's ships tried to respond, tried to adapt, but they were fighting doctrine and technology developed specifically to counter everything they could do. Enemy fleet is fragmenting, Okonkwo reported. Detecting multiple ships breaking formation. Some are attempting retreat vectors. Zaltef's second-in-command leaned close, voice urgent. Commander, we've lost over 200 vessels. Casualties are approaching 40,000. We need to withdraw before they destroy the entire armada. We can't, Zaltef said, but his voice held no conviction. The Empire doesn't retreat from primitives. These aren't primitives, his tactical officer shouted, abandoning protocol. They killed the architects. They've been waiting for us. Every defense, every weapon, every ship, this was all planned. We walked into a trap 2 centuries in the making. Admiral Chen opened a channel to the Kethric flagship, his voice cutting through the chaos of battle. Fleet Commander Zaltef, I'm going to make this very simple. You came to Earth with 847 ships. You have 612 left. In the next 10 minutes, you'll have 400. In 20 minutes, you'll have none. Or you can order your fleet to stand down right now, and I'll let you leave with enough ships to limp home and deliver my message. The transmission ended, leaving Zaltef alone with his decision. Around him, his command crew waited, their crest feathers flat with fear and resignation. Outside his viewport, human ships maneuvered with practiced precision, weapons charged, a fleet that had spent 200 years preparing for exactly this moment. And Zaltef finally understood the terrible truth. Earth hadn't just defeated the architects. They'd studied them. Learned from them. Surpassed them. The primitives he'd come to conquer had been the apex predators of the galaxy for 2 centuries, and everyone had been too blind to see it. His hand moved toward the fleet-wide channel, but before he could speak, new alarms shrieked across the bridge. His sensor officer's voice cracked with panic. Commander. Massive energy spike detected. It's coming from Earth itself. Deep beneath Earth's surface, in facilities that had been carved into bedrock during the darkest years of the Architect War, humanity's ultimate weapon came online. The Planetary Defense Corps, a network of interconnected architect reactors that humanity had spent 127 years learning to control, began channeling power on a scale that made fusion reactors look like campfires. What is that? Zaltef demanded, watching energy readings spike beyond anything his sensors could properly measure. Admiral Chen's voice came across all frequencies, calm and absolute. That, Commander, is what happens when you give us no choice. We call it the Architect's last gift. They built planetary siege weapons capable of sterilizing star systems. We found 3 of them in the ruins. We've been very, very careful about when to use them. On the Remembrance, Captain Reeves watched her tactical display as Earth's northern hemisphere lit up with barely contained quantum energy. Admiral, the planetary cannon is at 90% charge. Targeting solution locked on the Kethric staging area. Hold fire, Chen ordered. Let them see it first. Let them understand. The weapon emerged from beneath the Pacific Ocean, a structure so massive it created its own gravity well. 50 kilometers of architect engineering that humanity had rebuilt piece by piece, equation by equation, until they understood not just how to activate it but how to control it. The weapon's firing aperture opened, and spacetime itself bent visibly around the accumulated energy. Zaltef's science officer ran the calculations twice, then a third time, unable to believe the numbers. Commander, if that weapon fires at full power, the energy release will be equivalent to a supernova detonation. At these ranges, it would destroy our entire fleet in a single shot. Can we jump away in time? Zaltef asked desperately. No. The gravity distortion from the weapon's charging sequence is preventing FTL transitions. We're trapped. Chen, let the silence stretch, let the Kethric fleet sit in the shadow of annihilation, let every captain and crew member understand exactly how completely they'd miscalculated. Then he opened the channel again. You wanted to see our full capabilities, Commander. Here they are. We don't need to chase you through the system. We don't need to engage your ships one by one. We can end this entire fleet with a single trigger pull. But we won't. Do you know why? Zaltef said nothing, his mind racing through scenarios that all ended in death. Because we're not the architects, Chen continued. They would have destroyed you for threatening them. They would have hunted your species to extinction and burned your home worlds to cinders. We learned from them, Commander. We learned their technology and their tactics. But we didn't learn their cruelty. So I'm going to give you something they never gave us, a chance to leave. What are your terms? Zaltef asked, the words tasting like ash. Simple. You have 20 minutes to gather your surviving ships and exit this system. You return to the Kethric Empire and deliver one message: Earth is off limits. Sol system is quarantined. Any vessel that enters human space without explicit permission will be destroyed without warning or negotiation. Tell your leaders. Tell your historians. Tell your children. The species that killed the architects lives here, and we will defend our home with everything we learned from that war. Zaltef looked at his tactical display, at the 612 remaining ships from his once proud armada, at the humans who had systematically dismantled every advantage the Empire possessed. At the weapon charging beneath that blue planet, capable of ending everything in a flash of quantum fire. What if the Empire decides to return with a larger fleet? He asked quietly. What if they bring 5,000 ships instead of 800? Chen's response was immediate and cold. Then we'll demonstrate why the architect sent 7 fleets against us, and none of them came home. Commander, your species has conquered 17 civilizations. You've never faced a species that fights the way we do. We don't surrender. We don't negotiate when threatened. We win, or we make damn sure the enemy doesn't survive to celebrate their victory. The architects learned that lesson too late. Don't make the same mistake. Aboard the Kethric flagship, Zaltef's tactical officer highlighted the human fleet positions on the display. Commander, analysis complete. They have us surrounded. Every escape vector is covered. Even if we try to fight our way out, their predicted casualty rate for us is 97%. For them, it's less than 15%. They've been studying us, Zaltef realized. The entire engagement, they've been analyzing our tactics, our response times, our weapon capabilities. They know exactly how we fight. Of course they have, his second-in-command said bitterly. They probably detected our first scout ships years ago. They've had time to prepare for this exact scenario. We walked into their laboratory, and they dissected us. Zaltef made his decision. All ships, stand down. Deactivate weapons and prepare for system exit. We're leaving. Commander, his tactical officer asked, disbelieving. We're leaving, Zaltef repeated, his voice carrying the weight of absolute defeat. Send the retreat order. Now. The Kethric fleet powered down weapons systems and began organizing for withdrawal. Ships that had entered the system in perfect formation now scattered and damaged, limped toward the heliopause. Human vessels watched them go with weapons still charged, still tracking, a silent reminder that mercy could be revoked at any moment. Captain Rodriguez aboard the Defiant watched the alien retreat and felt satisfaction mixed with something darker. They're running. We actually did it. Did you ever doubt? His tactical officer asked. Every damn day for 200 years, Rodriguez admitted. We built all this on the assumption that someone would eventually come. Someone would find us and think we were easy prey. And we were right. Commander Okonkwo monitored the Kethric fleet's withdrawal, tracking each vessel as it crossed out of weapons range. Admiral, they're clear. All enemy ships have exited the inner system. Chen nodded slowly. Power down the planetary cannon. Stand down to alert condition 2. And get me casualty reports. The numbers came in across the next hour. 14 human ships lost. 3 orbital platforms destroyed. 837 crew members dead. Another 2,000 wounded. Heavy losses by any measure, but against an enemy fleet of 847 warships, losses that proved humanity's tactical superiority beyond question. 837, Chen repeated softly, reading the names scrolling across his display. They came expecting easy conquest. Our people paid with their lives to prove them wrong. They'll remember, Okonkwo said. The Ketheric and every species that hears about this. They'll remember what happened here. 3 days later, in the Ketheric Empire's capital, Fleet Commander Zaltef stood before the Imperial Council and delivered his report. His crest feathers remained flat with shame, but his voice carried unwavering conviction as he described everything he'd witnessed. The architect technology. The quantum weapons. The planetary siege cannon. The fleet that had been waiting in hiding for decades or longer. The tactical precision that could only come from fighting superior enemies and learning to win anyway. The humans are not primitives, Zaltef concluded. They are apex predators who destroyed the galaxy's most powerful species. They've been preparing for exactly this scenario since before our empire even existed. Recommend immediate reclassification of Sol system to Omega-level threat. No Ketheric vessel should enter human space under any circumstances. The council chambers fell silent. Then the senior counselor spoke, her voice carefully neutral. You're suggesting we avoid an entire species based on one engagement? I'm suggesting we survive, Zaltef replied. The architects thought themselves invincible. They're extinct. The humans killed them and took their technology. If we antagonize them further, we'll follow the architects into extinction. That is not a threat assessment. That is mathematical certainty. Within weeks, the story spread through the galaxy's information networks. Most species dismissed it as propaganda at first. Humans defeating Ketheric fleet. Humans possessing architect technology. Impossible. But then the evidence emerged. Sensor recordings from Ketheric survivors. Debris analysis showing quantum weapons signatures. And most damning, the simple fact that Zaltef had returned with barely 2/3 of his fleet, while Earth remained unconquered and very much intact. The galactic community began reassessing everything they thought they knew about the small blue planet in the Sol system. Trade routes were adjusted. Exploration fleets marked human space as restricted. And in every embassy, every military planning session, every academic discussion of galactic powers, a new designation appeared: Earth. The architect killers. Do not engage. 6 months after the battle, a small diplomatic vessel from the Quilix Confederation approached Earth's outer defense perimeter, broadcasting peaceful intentions and a formal request for contact. Admiral Chen, now commanding Earth's expanded defense network, reviewed their credentials carefully before granting permission to approach. The Quilix ambassador arrived with gifts and treaties, but more importantly, with respect. She stood in Earth's orbital station and looked out at the planet below, the world that had survived the architects and now stood as potentially the galaxy's most dangerous military power. We want to establish formal relations, the ambassador said carefully. Trade agreements. Cultural exchange. And most importantly, mutual defense protocols. The Ketheric Empire is not the only threat in the galaxy. Chen considered her words, weighing decades of isolation against the reality of galactic politics. What are you really asking for, Ambassador? Alliance, she said simply. The galaxy needs to know that there are species willing to stand together against aggression. The architects ruled through fear and dominance. The Ketheric through conquest. Perhaps Earth can demonstrate a different path. Perhaps, Chen agreed. But make one thing absolutely clear to your government and every species listening: Earth will never be threatened again. We'll work with the galaxy, trade with it, learn from it. But if anyone mistakes our willingness to cooperate for weakness, they'll learn the same lesson the Ketheric did. The ambassador's expression showed understanding. That message will be delivered. Along with another one, that humanity survived something no other species has survived, and the galaxy is safer for it. Admiral Chen stood on the observation deck long after the ambassador left, watching Earth rotate peacefully below. 214 years since the first architect ship entered the system. 73 years of war that should have ended in extinction. 141 years of preparation, building, waiting for the next threat. And now, finally, a galaxy that understood what humanity was capable of. Commander Okonkwo joined him at the viewport. The Quilix aren't the only ones requesting diplomatic contact. I'm seeing inquiries from 47 different species. Everyone wants to know more about the humans who killed the architects. Good, Chen said. Let them come. Let them see what we've built. Let them understand that we don't want to conquer or dominate. We just want to survive. And if they don't respect that? Okonkwo asked. Chen smiled, cold and certain. Then they'll join the architects in history. Earth doesn't start wars, Commander. But we damn sure finish them. The message spread through the galaxy in the months and years that followed, carried by every species that had heard the story of the Ketheric fleet's defeat. Sol system remained marked on every star chart with the same warning, translated into 1,000 languages but carrying the same essential meaning: humanity survived extinction. They learned from their enemies. They're still here, still watching, still ready. And they never, ever forget. The galaxy had tried to test Earth's defenses and found them impenetrable. They'd underestimated humanity once. The survivors made sure no one would make that mistake again.